Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've sat here and listened to this, and I wish I had about 30 minutes to talk about climate change. For instance, we had a record 142 months with no hurricanes. We talk about rising ocean levels, and I don't know how many people in this room realize that Alabama was once a seabed. Something happened to cause the seas to recede. But I don't want to get into science because I think it'd take too long to explain it all. But I have some major concerns about the budget. As you know, you and I have had conversations privately, and I want to continue to work with the White House to figure a way forward. But I do want to point out some things that I think are important and helpful in this budget, and that's the work requirements and some of the things that are being suggested and implemented by this administration. Mr. Director, for instance, Kansas implemented work requirements back in 2011. And I just want to point out that since that time, incomes for the people who left TANF and SNAP, the nutrition program, as our colleagues refer to it, their income increased 247%. Costs came down for the state and for the federal government, but their incomes went up 247%. Now, my dad was blind in one eye, had an 8th grade education. I grew up skidding logs from mules. I grew up dirt poor. And I understand the benefit of work. I've heard our colleagues attack the tax reform bill, first time in 30 years that we reformed taxes. And I'd just like to point out, when you give tax cuts to small businesses and to major corporations, it benefits people who grew up like I did, because I never had a poor person give me a job. I also want to point out that they implemented the work requirements in Maine, and they're earning about 7,000 people removed from the rolls. Now, these are able-bodied adults with no kids, all right, not everybody, able-bodied adults with no children, and their income went up combined $18 million per year. That's not crumbs, is it? All right, now let me get back to some more fundamental issues here. I wish that we could have a dialogue where both sides are really working for what's best for the country instead of throwing out political talking points. It's not a campaign, a political campaign when you get to the budget. It's really an effort to get us on a sound fiscal path. I'm not sure we're there yet. And you and I have had these conversations. I could literally sit down on a napkin and show you 1.2 to 1.6 trillion in additional revenues or savings that we could get. But if we don't fix the appropriations process, if we don't get back to making the House and Senate work, make this government work, it doesn't matter, does it?
No, sir, it doesn't. We would very much like to, in fact, one of the reasons that we supported the CAPS deal was to encourage a return to regular order in the appropriations process. It is the proper way for money to flow, the proper way for the administration to participate in the process, proper way for all of you all to be heard, and we would very much like to see a return to that paradigm.
Well, in that regard, if we can get the appropriations process restored the way it should work, and by the way, I think everybody in this room knows we passed all 12 appropriations bills last year. We did them in 2 packages, and we only had 5 Democrats vote for either one of them. So we did our appropriations work. But in regard to some of the issues that I think we can deal with in terms of trying to reduce this, our spending, you and I have talked about the improper payments. In 2010, when the Democrats had both houses of Congress and the White House, they passed the Improper Payments and Recovery Act. In 2012, they amended that act and passed Improper Payments and Recovery Improvement Act. What's going on right now is that even though we've tried to address this issue, we never did real enforcement, so the improper payments rate has continued to go up. Last year, it was $144.3 billion. Yet you're only showing a savings of about $150 billion over 10. I think we can do better, and I think it should be a bipartisan effort. Would you agree with that?
I would. We try to be conservative. As I said, I probably could have run that number up 10 times what we had and come in and said I'm going to balance the budget, but we've just not shown an ability yet to reduce the payments much larger than we have in the budget. So we think the numbers are a lot more solid. We look forward to working with Congress on reducing the amount of improper payments, keeping in mind that improper payments cover a wide variety of things. Everybody thinks it's simply a check written to somebody that shouldn't receive a check, and it's a lot more than that, as you know.
I know, and every dollar we send out improperly is a barred dollar that we're paying interest on. Thank you, Mr. Director. Mr. Chairman, I would like to enter into the record the report on Kansas, and I will print the report from Maine's, from their Department of Health and Human Services.
Without objection.
Thank you, sir.
Thank the gentleman. Let's go to Washington.